In there, if you're there, now open this integrated terminal. You click on terminal, you open new terminal. It will take you to the exact folder mahali huko. So sawa, if you are there, you just confirm this link is the same, and then we go from there. I'll be taking breaks, so let me just go fast, and then I'll wait for you. I'll take a break to wait for you. So back onto your browser, go to Laravel documentation. Just do Laravel doc. Do Laravel doc. The first link, go to Laravel documentation. Hapo si lazima muende. That one you can do it later, but for now I'm just explaining where we are getting all that. So in here you can see the first link is installation. So you'll go down on installation. You want first to install Laravel. Go down to where it's written Composer Create. So I hope you have Composer installed. So far you need to have it. If you don't have Composer installed, just go to Get Composer. Get Composer, you download this Composer. The first link you download here for Windows or for wherever OS you're using, you just download and install. That will install Composer for you. Now I want us to use this command, Composer Create a project, Laravel, and then you give it your project name. So on your integrated terminal, what you do, I want us to create the APIs here, the REST APIs. So what we'll do, you'll say create project, right? The same way the way it is on the Laravel doc. You say Composer create project. Composer create project. You say that it's not a mandatory. You said the preferred distribution. So you say Laravel, and then you specify the folder. Now the folder I want us to call it API. So you just say create project Laravel/Laravel. Composer create project Laravel/Laravel, and then space you say API. This should be Composer. So once you run that, that will create a new folder inside your intern, inside your intern folder. It will create another folder called API. So that's now the Laravel application that you're creating. That's the simple way of installing Laravel. So use that same way. You can find other ways, but use that for now. So wait for it to complete. So as it does the completion, go back to your browser, go to localhost as it continues to download. So when you go to your SAMP, you need to specify that folder. Immediately after localhost, you say localhost / the folder name, which is, for our case, it was intern. So in here, it will take us now to our application. This is the API. So this is like arranging our product the way we want it to be. So in here, we can have another folder, say frontend. You can create another folder here, say frontend. Say frontend. So this frontend folder will have frontend. We can have some tests. You can have whatever folders that we need. You can have another folder for test where you'll be writing your tests or whatever, or maybe where you'll be writing your documentation. You say docs, blah, blah, blah. So you can have as many folders as you go, but inside this project that we call intern. Yep. So if I refresh here on intern on localhost, you can see now all my folders created. You can see the APIs, the docs, and the frontend. So all those are the folders that we created for our application. So that's it. So now let's go to the next step. I hope this one completed. It's taking some bit of time. But anyway, as it continue installing these packages, the Laravel packages, I'll be explaining something on the directory structure. So let's go here. Let's be viewing that directory structure. So you can see we have a number of folders or directories, but what I just want to explain to you is just a few. For example, this app is where now all the necessary business and application logics lie. Application logics and business logic pretty means what the app is doing. Yeah? Basically, just understand is what the app is doing. So in here, you can find, if you're creating a console application, this is the folder where you need to add or whatever the things that you need to add. Plus it has this kernel.php. This is just to control if you're doing a kernel application, an application that will run on this on the command line, on the CMD. This is where you'll code it. the next folder is exception. This is where now you do the exception handling. So in here you will find there are a number of classes. So if you want like your API, if your API falls on error 404, for example, you will need to register that here. You say, for example, these blah blah. You say these slash reportable blah blah blah. You say here an exception maybe is not found exception or something like that. For example, not found exception, not found HTTP exception. If an exception like this, so you can create a sample stuff like this and say, in case something is not found, now return this, maybe return error item. So you can override this item not found, for example. So this one, it will mean wherever your API or your application lies into or founds an error not found exception, it will fall back into this return that you have created here. It will fall back to this function that you have created here. That's not our topic for today, so I'll just undo everything I've done on this class. It was just to show you. Let's go next. Next is HTTP. Now here is where now you have the controller and the middleware. So Laravel follows something we call MVP and MVC model. So this basically means model. It means model, view, and then controller. So this is a procedure or a model that we use whenever we want to, or whenever we want to like do an app and separate or orchestrate the models differently, the views differently, and the controllers differently. So we are just trying to separate all these three features in our application so that we have some logics. It's just like arranging your project in the better way. It's just a way of arranging your project so that controller on one side, views are on the other side, and then the models are on the other side. So that means your code or your application becomes much easier to maintain. That's the exact essence of this. So under this model, you'll find that this HTTP contains now the controllers. So this is where we have the controllers. For the previous Laravel versions, we could have also these models inside the HTTP, but for Laravel 8 plus, they removed that and put it in a different folder called models. So you can see where we have the models is here. We have the models, and then we have the controllers in here under HTTP controllers. So our controllers will be here, and then you'll find that, I hope you're seeing, let me maximize this. Let me make it bigger. So this is how it should be. So you find that this HTTP contains your controllers, and then models contains now your models. Models is what allows us, or the ORM that allows us to communicate to the database. Yeah, object relational mapping. That's the ORM. So just read a bit about ORM, you'll understand what I'm saying. But now, basically, in simple terms, in layman's language, model allows us to communicate to the database. The controllers is where now we put the business and application logics inside the controllers. And then out of that, now we have the views. The views are outside the app application. It's inside the resources folder. So inside the resources folder, you'll find these views here. So this is where you're putting your views, like on the login. Whatever you're seeing on the login should be here on the, for example, this welcome blade. So our app completed running. So let me just try to play it on here. So I'll just tap on our local host, and then I go to public. That's the simple way of installing Laravel app. So you'll see this is the Laravel app. So whatever we are seeing here goes on to the views. So this is the welcome blade here. So for example, in the welcome blade here, if I edit something, let me go back, make it a bit small. So if I edit something here, let's say I want, which word is here? Let me find this documentation. Let me find this documentation and try to edit it. Okay. So I'll come here to documentation and say I want it to be, let's say, Bula classes. Yeah, added it into Bula classes. So after I save that, you'll find that that should appear immediately on this view. So that means I've edited that to say Boolean classes. So the views, these one are wherever you're supposed to see. And Laravel uses something called Blade. So Blade basically is a way of displaying these HTMLs or loading these views in Laravel application. So if you're using Blade, there's no need of using now another front-end language. So if you want to create your app fully in Laravel, you just be coding your front ends here. For example, if I'm having a login page, I just say I need a login.blade.php. That one automatically will become a loading page, and you need to see how you're coding your names. Login.blade.php. At least make them look smart. So that's it. So inside here, you will be loading these views from now your controllers. So after that, so we are done with models, views, you know where it is, and the controllers. Now there's something called routes. Routes help us in doing the routings. And inside routing, you'll find that, for example, this web has these. So basically we have this route. For example, if I just do it quickly, I can say docs. And this one now should load the documentation, for example, and then I have another one, maybe say login. Maybe this one, I want it to load my login page. So I'll say login. Instead of taking this to controller, I can take it to controller. We do that in APIs. But in here, you can just say once, return this view instead of taking it to a controller. So it's like you're handling the business logic or the application logic inside your web route. So this is the web route, this is the API route. So all the APIs will be coding it here, but all the web will be coding it here. So I want to show you an example of that. So for example, we have the login blade here. We created on resources, login blade. So you just say here, go to login. You don't specify the blade. That's why you can see on their side, they have just said welcome blade. So this one will take you to welcome blade. But now for my login blade, I'll just say login. So if I right now go to my page and look for login, let me give this blade something and say, let's see what I'll say here. Maybe say, welcome to login page. Something like that, just a simple stuff like that. And then I go to my app here, I add the word login. So it should take me to welcome login page. So let's code for documentation. For example, I'll say on the web, this one, I just say docs. These docs go to documentation. For example, documentation. And then, or docs, or let me call this, let me call it just documentation so that it becomes much easier. So documentation, then I'll want to create this blade. Without it, right now, if I say go to docs, you'll find that I won't be able to see that. There will be an error, a view. You'll see a view error, documentation. Are you sure the view or .blade file is there? So this means the file is not there. So I'll create the file here inside views and say documentation .blade, and remember it's .php, for example. So right now, if I reload this page, it should be able to load that without nothing. So it'll say documentation page, so that at least you can see something in here. So that's how, if you want to create a login application, you just use that. So if you go to docs, if you go to login, if you go to another page like the home page, you'll find this Laravel page. So that's where the home page is. So this is controlling the web. What about the APIs? Because now learn in our applications, we'll be doing APIs on Laravel, and then the front end will not be doing them in here with the blade. We'll be doing them using Vue.js, so that we learn Vue, the front end powerful framework. So out of that, I'll be using the API folder. So I'll show you that this one, don't worry. That's our task for today. Let me now complete. So after that, you have this public folder. So this is where now the entry point of our application. You'll find that there's this index.php. This is where now our application will load this first. That's why when I came here onto the API folder, I went directly to public, because that's where our index, that's where our entry point is. So it's different from if you say here, for example, on this application of ours, if we say I want to load this application, let me say I have this called API, I change directory to API, and then I want to load. So I can also use the artisan command, say php artisan serve. So what this one will do, it will load that index and give me access to this particular API. So if I go on this, If I click on this, you'll see our page will load. The same view that we're having, it will load in here under these directories. So you can use PHP artisan serve to serve your pages, but I like doing it once and for all using the SAMP. SAMP is installed, so if I'm having multiple apps, I'll not worry about the ports, loading the app, serving the apps. I'll just automatically navigate to the folders like the way I'm doing here. I'll just go to whichever app that I want to check, and then I'll go directly and view my particular app. Now let's go in. Let's now learn how to create Laravel APIs. Yeah. Before that, so this is the folder which has the public. This is the entry point. Forget about now this database. Let's go back a bit. So this bootstrap is whatever does the bootstrapping. You can see the cache or whatever, but our topic today is not there. On config file, the only thing we need to config is to know is this app. The app file, now what does it do? The app file, whenever anything we are loading onto the env file, there's the .env, that means the environment file. Whenever you are setting our parameters, you'll see how we are using that. So once we set anything there, whenever you run your Laravel application, automatically it will load these with the parameters that you have in your env. So this becomes the main configuration file for our application. There are the rest here based on the plugins that you're having and the third-party applications or the third-party plugins that you're having on our app. You'll find their configurations here. But then this app is the major one, but we will not be editing it. Whatever we want it to display here, we'll be doing it under our env. There's the .env file here. So let's go. So these routes, I've explained it. The database is now, this is where now we have the migrations. I'll show you how we create some. The migrations. Migration basically is for creating databases. Migrations, basically, we use it to create the database tables. Like we have our database, we want to create tables. I'll show you how that one works. Factory is to populate some data. We can say, like, for example, this user factory, you'll find that you can create, using Faker, you can create some dummy data to add on to your database. Mostly you won't be using this, but when it's required, how we populate data, dummy data into our databases or into our tables, we'll use the factories. For now, I want you to concentrate on migrations and seeders. Seeders also does the same thing as factory, but now factory generates, like we want a huge number of dummy users, you'll use factory to do that. But sometimes you might just want to like populate your database with just some few data. That's when now you'll use this database seeder. So factories will help you generate a large or a huge number of fake or dummy data. But now seeders will help you. For example, you want, let's say we have book categories. You are doing an application for books, and then we have book categories. You want to create some default categories. You can use these seeders to create that category. I'll show you that with when we get to now doing it. Next, there's languages. This is where you do the localization of the application. And then from there, we have this storage. So everything that you save using the file system helper function, whenever you're doing like save file in anywhere on this app, it will basically go by default to this storage. So this storage is where the application files are being stored. So anything that we will be saving, like images, if you want an app to be uploading images, uploading files, we'll be doing them. They'll be going inside our storage folder. Test is for running the unit test and stuffs like that, but we'll not be doing that for now. And then this vendor file, this is where now our application, whatever we ran, composer, composer update, composer, blah, 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 any composer packages that is being added, because you know now composer is a package manager. On Vue.js and React and Angular, we'll find there's npm, node package manager. But now for here, for PHP application, you have composer, that's the package manager. So wherever we are running the composer, anything, composer do, composer update, composer blah, 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 all those, it will, basically this is where composer manages. So you see, like, these are the plugins that we need. So in production, we will not be, a lot of times you won't be needing some of the packages, like for example, the packages that you use in development and stuff like that. But all that will go into the vendor folder. So this is where our packages will come into. After there, we have the env. So this is very important. Under the env, we have some of the things that I need to show you. So this is where you create the app. For example, this, we can change our app name to be intern. So you'll find like anything on this app, let's say internship. Anything for this app, you'll find it will change. Now this app name will change from Laravel to internship based on whatever the env that we have added here. But now for this to pick this env, there's a artisan command. So PHP artisan basically is what enables you to interact with your application via the command line. So we can say PHP artisan. For example, there are a lot of artisan commands. You can find them on documentation. Check them later on the link that I showed you. However, there are some of the commands that you need to know. For example, the optimize one. So if you say optimize, this one will optimize your app, and you can also say optimize clear to maybe clear your cache and everything and set everything to the way you want it to be, right? So let me do something small here. Let me minimize this a bit so that you can see the entire stuff, the entire screen. Yes, there it is. Yep. Yeah, so that's it. So how do we do this? Now we can say also PHP artisan config clear, so that will clear the configuration file where our app has cached. So once you do that, when you go back to here, these a lot of things on this Laravel app will have picked from is like just clearing whatever we are having on our env and our config file, basically to output whatever we are having. Now what I wanted to explain here was this database connection. Now, the default one is MySQL. You can see this is where you configure your MySQL. This is like saying localhost, this is the port, this is the name for the database. So for example, we want to create a database or manage a database. Our APIs basically will be doing them. Let's give this app of ours a name. Let's call it EduSpace. Let's call it EduSpace. So EduSpace will be an application. Let's put it with an underscore. So EduSpace will be an application for managing our students. Then this is the username of your SAMP or whatever MySQL database that you're using, be it remote or be it local. And then this is the password for it. So mine right now doesn't have anything. But when you start running the migrations, you'll see this. Okay. So up to there. Composer, this JSON now contains all the files that have been installed by Composer. So you can see the Laravel framework, whatever, blah blah blah, all other things that you're having on Laravel application, you can see them there. So that's the same thing which happens, although the package of JSON, blah blah blah, and that's it. So we are done with seeing the directory structure of our application. Now I want us to dive into now the coding itself. So close everything and let's now start the journey together. Yeah, so make sure you're there, try and make sure you're there. The only thing I did is make sure the Laravel application is installed, and on your SAMP you can see this. You can see this screen here. On your SAMP you can see this. I'll be taking a short break and then I'll get back into the tutorials. Yep, so we are done with that. So let's go. So we are done with installing our Laravel application. We are done up to that point. So we'll be going to the next step. Yep, so our next step will be now doing the APIs. So what is REST? What is REST API or RESTful APIs? So REST, if you go to REST API, once when you are saying mute your mic kindly, Alex. So we say RESTful API is an interface through which the program or website talks to another, blah blah blah. RESTful APIs. So RESTful APIs basically means the APIs that are using these methods here, like the post, put, delete. So it's not limited to one. You find previously we were doing APIs, and then you just do a post API or a get API or a put API. Is hard to only do a get API, but for post API previously we were doing them. But right now we want to support all these. They are called HTTP verbs or HTTP methods. Post, put, get. So what get does, I'll show you on the API, is just for fetching data. Post is for creating a new item or posting data. adding data, new data. So it's basically used for create and insert operations. And then put is for updating. Whenever we want to update a data, we might use put or patch, P-A-T-H. Patch, P-A-T-C-H. And then delete is for deleting data, and so many other, there are options there or whatever, but this is basically what we'll be looking up to. And so this is where we want to create our APIs in. Now back to our API. Now in here you see that this root is for web. If we say you add an API root, if you are doing the one that you serve, you'll say localhost and then port 8000, and then you say API to go to the APIs. But if you're here, you're on the web route. So you want to go to the API route. Where is the API route? Back to the VS Code, you'll find inside our route, there is something we call API. So this is where we are having the API routes. I hope you are there. So these are the API routes. So anything that we load will come onto this API route. So for example, let's create now a new route. So in here, we'll just say root. Go with me as I create. So you just say root, colon, and then you say the kind of root that you want to create. Assume this first, I'll show you, because this one is using a middleware called the Santam. So I'll show you also later on the advanced courses on how to use the middleware. But for now, let's just do a simple get root. Yeah, because if right now you say this one / API, you find that we couldn't land anywhere because there's no route like this. Even if you say on our app here, you add after public, you add API, you will find this is 404 not found. So this also you can handle it with the exception, the one I showed you, the handler. You say whenever it's 404, show me a very nice message, maybe tell me under maintenance or something like that, or come back later or something like that. So that's it. So let's go next. So let's create our first root. So you just say root colon get. So root is a facade. Facade have access or helper function or access methods that are inside the Laravel framework. A framework is meant to make our work easy. So this root is one of the helper functions inside the facade. You see there's illuminate support facade. So there's a method created by root, so it will help us. There are a number of those facade or helper functions that we'll be using along the way. So having these colon it shows that this is a static kind of a method. Yeah, you know what static means? It's a method that can't be rather be updated. So let's go. So we say get, let's create a test root. So you just give it a root and then you put a comma, and then here you call the controller that you want to. This is like the callback. So the callback function will come here. So you'll find, like, for example, in web, what they were doing, they were adding this function here. So this is a callback function. What's a callback? A callback function, it's a function being called inside another function. Yeah, after an execution of a certain function, call this next function. So that next functions become a callback function. It's a landing function, the final function which will run after the initial function has executed. So in here, it's just like saying get, whenever this root is called, the home root, whenever that root is called, after you go to the middleware, blah, 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 if you're having a number of functions to run before it, after bootstrapping, whatever, finally run this method. Return for me the welcome page. For APIs now, I want us to start by running directly into our, so here instead of a callback, we'll give it a controller here. Yeah, a controller, because our controller is what is supposed to handle our methods and our functions. So let's go to app http and then controllers. You'll find there's one controller here, the default one, but this one will not touch it. So what we'll just be doing, we'll be creating our controllers here. There's the traditional way of creating. You can say here create new file and you call it controller blah blah blah, but that probably won't work. So what we do, we use the artisan to operate these and create a controller. So just go down into your terminal and just do php artisan make. So we are using the make artisan command. So you say make colon controller. Now notice there's this option, you can say r/r. That means you are making a resource controller. So there's a difference between a resource controller. Let me do an example. Say make r, I say this is resource controller, my resource controller, say my resource controller, something like that. Let me just say an example of that. And then I create another one, I just say just controller. Yeah, you see, without this r option, you see the difference. Just controller, just a controller. So let's go here. So after this command is executed, you'll find there are two files created here. There's just controller and my resource controller. So if you go to just controller, you'll find it just created an empty controller, no functions. It's just an empty class of this controller name that you gave it without any other thing. Notice that whenever I'm creating the controllers, I'm using the camel case way of coding. So I'm just doing capital J and then capital C, the same way I'll do for models and wherever. That's the standard way of doing it. Yeah, so that's it. Next, we have now this my resource controller. So notice when you add the R, when you add this R option, you are telling it that create this resource controller, not just a controller, but a resource controller. So it will create the initial functions for you. Like this one is index, this one is create, this one is store. So it will create like a CRUD. I can call it a RESTful now, a RESTful controller. Yeah, if there's a name like that, I'll just say this is a RESTful now controller. It has all the methods to do all the CRUD, all the delete, all the show, all the create, all the update. All those functions are already there. So this is a quicker way of creating instead of starting from just a controller. All right, so up to there, let's delete this. Hope you are not doing that. I just did that for an example, so I delete it. Let's create a controller now. Let's say we are creating an app for managing students. That's called EduSpace. So let me just create a resource controller. So let's say, go with me now, type PHP artisan make controller, then give an option of R to main resource controller, and then say students controller with a capital C and so just say student controller in singular, don't put in plural, and then tap on enter. So that will create a controller here for you called students controller. So what we want to do, we want to point our APIs for students into this controller. So let's start with an example. Let's do this first. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's say, for example, in here you want to, let's say, let me first try and use so that I show you very well. Let me just try and use a callback function. So this one, I have no request parameter onto this. So I just say this the dot callback function, and then in here I'll return something. Laravel requires you to complete with a semicolon, so remember to add it here so that you remove the errors. And then here I can return a data. I can say, all right, even I can say, yeah, let me first return a data, just some dummy data, and I just say success, or maybe I just say maybe success true. Let me just create a JSON here so that I show you also how we need to be doing it in APIs. Yeah? So I'll create a JSON here. This one I'm doing for test, so don't code it. Once you just have the student controller, just watch what I'm doing. So I'll just say student, this one. For Laravel, you do this. You say success is true. And then this one now needs to be an array, yeah, not an object. And then you have to complete it with so just check well what I'm doing. So you say success is true. Maybe you can say the code is, because for API you need to give the code, let's say 200 for success, and then you say maybe the data, you give the data if that is successful. For data, for my case, I'll just say let me just say one success. I'm working, yeah, let's just say working. All right, then I'll format it. The command I'm using to format, I'm using control plus alt control F, but that one you need to set it up if you want to format. But for mine, you see, to format document, I'll use Shift Alt F. You can right click on your IDE to see whichever command that's there to format this data. So let's try. Let's go to this test API and see if we'll receive this data. So I'm doing this, but I'll show you the easiest way of doing this. So we'll just come here and say /test. Let's see if we'll receive that data. Perfect. So that data is returned. However, this mine will be formatted because I have this JSON parser installed. I have this JSON reader which can read JSON. That's why it's formatting it. Otherwise, you just find a dummy text. So that's an example of using a callback. Now, let me show you something pretty quick so that we don't be moving to page after page and changing screens. So there's something here. There's a plugin called REST. So go to these extensions and look for REST client. Just type that onto your left menu. You'll find this REST client here. So you'll find this REST client. Click it and install it. So what that will help us is instead of going to Postman or using there's another one called don't remember the name, but there are a number of applications like Postman which will help us test our APIs. So you can just test it in the IDE using this REST client instead of switching screens and going to that. So that one help us to do for simple APIs is very nice because now you can do a quick. So after installing it, probably it will ask you to reload. Mine is already installed, so I don't need to do that. So once that is installed, and if it's asked you for a reload, just do a reload. It will reload that page. Now in here, we want to create our API calls or our API test. So go to the API folder, minimize all these other folders, and just like immediately after this API, just create a file here and call it what do we call APIs or something like that, or just call it test. So that's where we'll be testing our API. So just say test.http. So we're just testing our HTTP. So this file will come there. So we want to write our first call. So what we just do, yeah, so inside API folder, just create that file called res test.http inside that folder. You can go to new file or tap on this. So create that, call it test.http. Alex, in case you have an error or a problem doing that, you let me know pretty fast before I just move to the next. So in here, we want to do these API calls, like the same thing I'm doing here. Probably, if you'll be watching this video later on, I'll upload it. You can do this test by yourself, but this is not what I want us to do right now. This one is just for demonstration. Later on, I'll have you create this. So if you say this test, so this API, instead of calling it on our browser, this get API, you just copy that and then go to here and just write get is a get API, and then you tap that folder. So that will create for you the first request. So up to there, I'll give you some 2 seconds to create that test, just to make sure you're on the same page. You're there? Yeah. So create this helper function, this route, the first test route, call it test, and then create this sample return for this. Also, it's not a mandatory return these into JSON, but later on we'll be turning them into JSON. And then from there, what I want you to do is just write this test.http and then create these requests based on the way you named your file on your local host. So once you tap on this send, it will automatically do that request for you. So instead of using our browser or Postman, we'll be using this REST client to do the rest of the remaining task. So I'll give you a 5-minute break. Do that up to that stage and let me know in case there's anything. So meet on the next stage. Yep. So we are there. So there's something also I want to show you. There's something pretty easy that I wanted to show you. That is, in here you might force these. You find that if you don't have these, if you don't have these, if you don't have the REST client, you find that if you don't have these REST client, if you don't have this JSON parser, this one, it will display as this, just some raw data. So you in doing your API the standard way, you need to auto format this from your backend. Yeah, you find that if your browser doesn't have this parser or this JSON reader, it will display something like this. So to format this or to force it, you might use a helper function called JSON. So I just want you here before this array, you can just cut the entire stuff, and then say response here. Once you say response, response. So once you say response, it will give you this number of responses. So select the one for response, illuminate hash, HTTP. No, use this illuminate /support/facade. So all of these responses, they are there, but they are used differently. But for you, I want you to use these illuminate/support/facade, so that we use that standard facade. So once you select that illuminate support facade, put semicolon and say JSON. So once you have that JSON, you'll see it there. Once you tap on enter, it will give you an brackets. So paste whatever you're having in there, and then this semicolon, put it at the end. That's it. So we have automatically forced this to display in JSON. Like this response, you want it to go back in JSON. And in here also, you can give it some code. You can say, I want it to come as 404 or to come as 200 if it's a success. You can give it some response type. So if you do that, you go back to your test.http and tap on send request, or go back to your browser to just see if that one worked. So even if you say raw data, it should. So you see, even if I'm on raw data, not really. I think if you don't have this browser, it should be able to give you this one as JSON. Yeah. So that's how it should be. So that's it. Let's move to the next. Let's go to the next. Yeah, so guys, let's do this for the next few minutes, then I'll give you some break so that you take you pick your, or you grab something, and then we continue. So right now it's 7:53, so we'll come back at around 8:30, something like that. Yeah, because I want us at least to do this stuff. So that's it. So we have created our first API successfully. This is a get API. Now let's put this one into our controller. So this return, this callback function, let's put it inside our controller. So what you just do, copy from this function to up to the last, the last curly brace. If you cut that, it should not have any error up to there. So I want you to pick that, whatever you have cut from there, and go into our controllers, go into our apps controllers, HTTP controllers, students controller, in the index, and paste the entire stuff there. So just paste the entire stuff there, and then remove this function. You don't need that function slash. Remove those curly braces and format it. So this response also, it will complain. So just remove one letter, add it again. It will give you the import options. You import the support.facade response. That's it. After you're done with that, now we want to take it to the controller. So how we do it, we just have two curly braces. This one was modified in the latest version, I think from Laravel 8, where we can call a class directly. So in there, you just open these curly braces and close it, and then you say students controller, students controller. Sorry. So you just say students controller, pick that, enter it, and then put semicolon, add the class, and then say comma. We want it to go to index. So this is how you can specify. You can say this test goes directly to this index function. So if you're having a test function, it will go directly to a test function. but right now we want it to go to index. So save that. Once you tap on your test client, you are supposed to see the same result. If you don't see the same result, then know that you have done an error. So make sure you're there, and then we go to creating our next API. So make sure you can use this test, and also you can try creating a new class. You can create, instead of index, you can just come here onto this class and create your own, say custom class. You say public function test. You create your own test function and then return all these in your test function. Still it will work the same, and this is now this test function is what you call inside here. Instead of index, you call test function. That's it. It should display the same thing. Do that, and then you're continuing in 10 seconds break. Yep, so we are running out of time, but let's see. So Alex, I hope you're there. Let's continue. So this is test. Let's go next. Now I want us now to learn something. There's the way the reason we created. Let me close this. The reason we created this as a resource controller is because we want to, instead of doing this, calling these classes the way you're calling it, we might want to call it as a resource controller. So what you just do, you say root. Go with me. Just type root colon and then say resource. Resource. There is the resource there in Illuminate support facade. A lot of times we'll use that. So under that resource, once you enter it inside those brackets, you just say student. I'll show you how that one works. And then outside it, you just, without now the closing and opening box bracket, you just say students controller. Students controller dot class. Yeah, that one. So I'll show you what happens. So now there's something which happens here. If you go onto this API and use the PHP artisan root list, right now you'll find there's a number of roots. But let me first do this. Let me remove these. Let me comment out. To comment, you just use control and / to comment that out, and then I save. Then I say PHP artisan root list. You'll see I have just a few number of API roots. Well, whatever we're having in here, you can see we're just having these API user and API / test. So if I remove this user here, the above API, you'll find that if I run it again, PHP artisan root, you'll find that the root now remains less and less and less. So these are the web roots, and these are the web roots that we created. I can remove them. If I go to web and then I remove all these, you'll find that all these roots will be removed, but I want to remain with the one for loading the home page, so I can remove these ones. So you'll see that our roots will be reduced to whatever we are having. So if I say PHP artisan root list, you'll see the roots are reducing to the exact things that you're having. So in here we just have one API root, that is API / test. So if I add another root in here under API, I add this root dot resource. For example, if I say here I add test2, I say there is test2 and I save, you'll find now this root will be test1 and test2. So we have two roots. But now notice if I remove this root, let me do this. If I remove that root, we are remaining with one root, which is test, one API root. And then I uncomment whatever I just created, resource root. So this resource root, what it will happen, it will now create other multiple, the REST roots now. You see we are creating a RESTful API, so it will create the REST roots. You can see in here we have now multiple roots created. You can see all these API / student API. So all these, like how many roots? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 roots were created out of the resource controller. So I just say in here resource instead of get or post. If this one was post, I could just say post here, yeah, or delete or whatever I want for your custom roots. But then if I want a resource root to attract this student control, I'll just use the resource keyword, and then I say student. This is the name of all the APIs under that, and then you'll see it will create all those API. So it will create a get API, a post API, get, put and patch, then it will create a delete API. So all these are APIs which are calling the different classes inside this resource controller. So let's get started. Let's try out what they have. So let's do this. Just remove this, or just comment it out. For your case, comment this test, the student, the get test route that we created initially, comment it, remain with only this resource route. Let's test it out. Go to the first one, go to on this REST client, just copy this, copy that get, and then take it to the next to the next line. And then before this, you just have to put the 3 hashes to ensure that this is a new request. That's how the rested client works. So once you create these two, the triple hash, it will now know that this is a new request. So it will give you this button to send request. So from there, instead of test, say student. So that one will go directly to this route in here, the student route. This is the first route here, student route. And this one, as you can see, at the end of it, it tells you that this one goes to student controller / index. If you post to the same route, it will go to students controller.store. If you post to blah, 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 so it will go to all these different 7 classes or 7 functions created in our resource controller. So let's try this. Let's do student. So once we tap on send request, it will go to student. Nothing is returned. That means that API is not created. So let's create that. So for index, if you have changed yours to test, mine I changed it to test. So if you change it, that's return the same data. Return it to the index function, inside the index function. So once you return it there and save, once I tap on send request, you'll find that I received that data. So that's where our API now started. So we have already created one API, one resource API with all these 7 routes. So we want to do a CRUD for students. That's where we are at. So let's start from the first one. First, what I need to do is now start linking my application to my database. So that's what I'll do next. Go to here, and I want this to point to my database. So I'm starting to initiate my database. So what we'll just do here, remember our env class. So just open our env class, confirm that you have under database, under this DB connection, you have added this eduspace name of the database. We'll create this database in a minute. So just add that name for the database. And also notice that here, like this one is usually help us create the mailing. This is the mailing parameters if you want to do the emails. However, now let's concentrate on this. On eduspace, now go to your SAMP and create this database called eduspace. So I'll just open my SAMP. I'll just go to localhost in here. And then after localhost, it will tell me dashboard. I'll go to phpMyAdmin. And then in here, I'll try create the app itself, or the database itself, and then I'll link my application. So this one you need to do it when SAMP is running, MySQL and Apache is running on SAMP. So I just come here, create a new database, call it eduspace, then I say boom, create. Can't create database, oh, it already exists. So let me remove whatever is existing, because I think there's another project running on this. Yeah, so let me remove this. Let me drop this database, and then so that you can create together. So go here on create database, create it called eduspace, then create that. So once you create that, it will create for you a new database without any table. So that's where now migration comes into play. So I'll close this and just come to this under the once I've created this one, to just notice if my database is connected. Once I run the php migrate command, if you say php artisan migrate command, it should give me an error if my database is not connected. But once this one goes successfully, it shows me that my database is already connected, and it's well connected, right? Yeah, it's well connected. So you can see this one is just running those migrations. You can go to database to confirm database migrations. These are all the migrations that you're having. So all these migrations are created by this create user. It started by create user, create password, create blah blah blah. And these migrations has some parameters defined in it. We'll create one for that and see how we define these. And then when you go to our database now, you'll find that our empty database now is populated with some table. Just refresh here. You'll see now we have these migrations, like the users table is already created plus their fields in here. So that's the work of migration. So let's create our student migration. So I'll close this and then go back here. Just make this one smaller. You can also use Control B to remove Control B to toggle the left navigation. Yeah. So once I'm there, I'll just do this. I'll just say PHP artisan. I'll just go back to wherever I had PHP artisan make migration. Now I want to make a migration. Make migration. Then migration, you do it like this. If you want to create a table name, you just say create student or students table. Yeah, say create students or student. I like it to make it in singular. So create student table. So that will create that migration for you. Once you tap on that, it will create these migrations. You might also want to create migration plus the model. Learn the options that we use there. There's an option for creating migration plus the model plus the controller. So learn that. I'll leave you to research on that. However, for now, because I don't want to confuse you, I just want to first, let's create this student migration. So when you go back to, if you do Control B again, you'll find there's a new migration created here. It's called the student that creates the create student table migration. If you say create, let's say create test table here, test table, just look onto my left navigation here, the Explorer, you'll see a new migration created there. So if I tap on that, you'll see there's this new migration created. That was just for test. I'll delete it. Let's go back now. So in here, we have this migration already created, student migration. So let's go back to this. So this migration, we want to define a table. This ID will define for you the primary key, which is this ID. If you go to the table structure, you see this ID is already defined as a big int of 20 and then is auto incremented. So this first table, it defines the first field. This one now for the timestamps define the created data and updated data. These are the timestamp fields. So this by default, if I run that migration right now, it will create created data, updated data, and ID as the default table definitions. So let's create now our fields inside that table. So you just go there in, you say table, and then you create, for example, the first one, I might want to create a text or a string or a variable character. Let's say I want to create a variable character, varchar of say name, the name of the student, and then I'll give it a limit. I'll say name should not go more than 50, and then this name I might say also I want it to be unique. I want this name to be unique. Give it an option there. So learn more about the migration on Laravel documentation. They are very nice and very well written. The second one, I might say I want table, I want to define maybe a float and say this is the student score. Yeah, say the score, and then this score maybe I want it by default, I want it to be 0. This score I want it to be 0 by default, so I'll say just default 0, right? I might want something like student details, for example. I just copy that and say this one is a text, so this is the data type, and then I say these are the details, or the home address. I say this is the home address, or let's just say address, and then this address of mine, I don't want to put it as mandatory, so I can say this one is nullable. So those are just some of the examples of how you can define a table. So let's run our migration and see. So to rerun this, because I've run the first migration, to rerun this, I'll just say PHP artisan so I can do, because I did migrate previously, but if right now I do migrate, it will only migrate this table of mine. At times you might want to delete all the tables and create them afresh, because maybe you've added primary keys or you have edited some of your migrations. So you just say PHP artisan migrate and then say fresh, And if you want your seeders to run, you might add these options and say seed. That one will run your seeders. We are not there yet. So let's just do PHP artisan migrate. So that's supposed to run these two migration. Let's see where the error is. Varchar does not, oh no, so there's nothing like variable character. I think it's character, if I'm not wrong. Let me try that. Yeah, I think it's character. So change that. Sorry for that. It's not varchar. You just say characters and then you say name should be 50 and it should be unique. So let's see whatever have been created after this migration of ours. So let's go back to this and refresh this database. You'll find a new table called student. Let's see the structure. So it created an ID, it's a big int, a name, which is a variable character of 50, and then the score, which is a double with 2 decimal places, and then there's an address, which is nullable, so it can be null. That's why we said it's nullable. Period. You are done with migrations. Try out with different tables, different data types, different parameters and options to see how that one works. So having these, now I have my migration, I have my table created. Now let's go to our models. So in here, open this folder called models. In here, view these models. So let's create our student model. So how does it look? You say PHP artisan make model, then I say student in singular. Yeah? Models are usually written in singular. So you just say PHP artisan make model student. That one will create for you a model here called student. Now this is where we are at. So there are things that we need to define in here. For example, let's start from private. Just say private. After your model is created, just say private primary key. This one is important because sometimes you might not want your primary key to be ID. Maybe you want this one to be auto ID. So if you call this one on your migrations, if you call this one auto ID, say maybe this one you say is a big int, and then you say it's auto ID in here, you put auto ID the same way I've put this. I've added that. So you will find that in here you need to define. You say this one is auto ID, for example. But for our case, it's ID. So you can leave it as ID that way. But now Laravel is intelligent, so it will know that if you write this one /ID, if this one is ID, you don't need to specify this. This is just like overriding if this name is different. But if it's the same and it's in small letters, you might skip this. So as well, you might do away with that. Let's go to the next one, protected. Or yeah, protected. It should be protected, even the first one. Sorry. No, private. I think. Let me just confirm from here. Protected. Yeah, sure. So you need to specify this one as protected, not private, but protected primary key. Protected primary key. And then protected table. So you might also want to specify the table name. Maybe the table name you didn't create the same table as the migration the way it is. But for now, you see this student is student. So this table name being student and this one is student on the migration, that means it's much easier for you to just leave that out. Laravel is much intelligent to learn that. But for me, I'll just have it added. I'll just say student. I'll just add that. I just like doing that way to avoid a lot of errors. Even this for the ID, I usually just like to overwrite them to just avoid some potential bugs. Yeah, so have that as that. And then there's also something we need to define, which is protected fillable. So fillable means those fields that you can edit via your model. If you call your ORM, like if you call this model anywhere, which fields can you edit? So in here, I'll give it, like you see the timestamp and the IDs are usually the default keys, so they'll be auto incremented, and the other ones they are given the timestamp. But for this one, I'll have some of the few that I need them to be editable. So I'll say name is editable. The other one we called it what? Let's go to the migration. The other one we called it score and address. So I'll say in here I want also score to be defined and then address also to be editable. So once you have that created, so you have the three fields defined. That's it. So we are done with our model. We have defined the fillable, we have defined the primary key. So the next thing remaining, they are relationships. This one we'll do them later. So these are the relationships. So get up to there and then you're continuing the next 5 seconds to do that. So do up to that. Yes, now I want to show you something, some of the shortcuts. Yeah, acha tu niandike hapa because of time. Yeah, shortcuts. Okay, so for example, there's something I've seen someone doing here. Unapata umeandika something like this one, maybe unataka kuedit kitu kaa hii, unataka kuandika hapa maybe school, the school of the student, umeandika hivi, and then ukarealize inafaa ikuwe ndani ya hizi comma. Sawa Alex? So what you do, you just, this one you can select it. The way you select the entire text, if you're here, if your cursor is there ama hapa, you say Control D. If you say Control D, it will select the entire word. Hata ukienda hapa kwa hii ya juu useme Control D, it will select the entire word. So you say Control plus D. This one will select the whole word. Select word. So if you are in a word here, hizi source code nitawapea baadaye, si lazima muandike hizi, nitawafundisha tu. So if you say Control D ukiwa hapa, ita select the entire word. So for example, I want to add a comma huku na comma huku. What I'll just do, I just go to this word, either in the beginning ama at the end, niseme Control D and then nieke hiyo, niandike hiyo quotation. So it will put it inside the quote. That's a simple shortcut that I want you guys to learn. That's shortcut number one. Control D, and then you just select the entire word and then you put your comma. Another type, you might want to add something like, for example, assume hizi vitu zote hapa hazina comma, and I want to add comma on all of these. How will I do it? Simply. So to edit multiple line, unaeka cursor on your first line, and then unashikilia Control na Alt, and then unatumia hii arrow ya chini, una select paka place yenye unataka ikue. So from there, I can add whatever thing I want to add, like start of text. Usijali nitaandika hizi, just check on my screen uone vitu zenye nafanya. Start of the text, I can put that. So hiyo itanisaidia kuedit multiple lines at once. You say Control plus Alt plus arrow. So that one will help you to multi-select. I want to select these classes to edit all of them. So Control Alt, then arrows, and then a delete lines zenye nataka. Kama nataka kuenda mwisho wa hii text, nitafinya tu Control na nifinye hiyo arrow ya mbele. It will take me to the end. Hivyo. Nikifinya mara mbili itanipeleka to the end, and then naongeza hiyo comma. So there's also Control na arrow. Learn that. Control plus arrow. That one will take you to the end of line. Yeah? To the end of line. That's it. This one will do multiple edits. That's just some of the shortcuts. Nitaendelea kuonyesha zingine as we go. So nikizikumbuka nitakuwa naandika kwa hiyo file yenye tuko. Sawa? So remember this one is in student. So let's continue. Tumemaliza ku-create model, tumemaliza ku-create migration ifunge, tumemaliza ku-create API hiyo root, the root file ifunge, we are done with that, and then tunabaki na test na controllers. Now let's do the charm here. So this is where now we are putting the application logic and the business logic. So let's go. Let me maximize this to be a bit bigger. So remember what I told you, when we are on this API root, when we tap on, let me put this one at the end, to the right. Where is it? To the say this one panel position to the right. In here, if we say PHP artisan root list, you'll find that we have this number of the APIs that we had created. We have some number of APIs that we had in here. Remember, we have these multiple APIs. We have these posts, these students. So remember, this student was going to the index. This one was going to the post, blah, blah, blah. Now, let's put that into test. That's what I want. After we are done with that, you guys will be good to do the REST APIs. That's the end of our lesson today. Yeah? So I'll say panel position bottom. Let me just put it bottom because of testing. Now let's start from here. We want to code and get all the students in the data. Let me just show you one thing. Let me show you how to use the migration. This one, don't code with me. Don't code this one with me because we are doing the CRUD. I want us to be a bit fast. So let me just try and create one migration here so that I can use it to populate some data. So let me go. So inside here, we'll find that I need some seeders. Sorry, some seeders. So in here under seeders, keep an eye on this seeder, the seeder folder. So I'll just say PHP artisan make seeder. So this one I'm just doing for you to know how it is used, but you'll do it later on, not practically in this class. So PHP artisan seeder. Let's say student table seeder. You call it with capital letter. That's how it's done. So you just say PHP artisan make seeder student table seeder. It will create this seeder for you. Go inside it. Now here I can use the model that we are having. I can say student. When you tap on student, it will ask you to migrate that model, and let's say create or insert. You can use create or insert. Either of these should be working. And then in here you can specify now which kind of a student do you want to add. For example, the first name. I say my first student is Alex Bill, for example. I say that's my first student name. I put it inside an array. The description was not mandatory. I can leave it as that. The score, maybe the default was 0, but I want to put it. I can say the score is he got 95.00, 95.25, because we have had it as float. So if I have like 10 of these done here, you can put it in for loop if you are very smart. I can say this is Mary Jacqueline, something like that. Say this one scored 25%. I say this one is Brian Bills. This one scored 75%. I might say there's another student here called John Doe. This one scored 25%. That's it. So I say I need those students. So how do I run it? Now, before you run it, you need to have this one defined onto your database seeder. So what you just do, you copy this name, then go to database seeder, or just type it directly. So inside database seeder, what you can just do, you can just say, you call that class. You just say student table seeder. It will ask you for that class, and then you say dash class. So that one is what we'll call now our class. But then this one, I think you need to add it inside an array. Not sure about that, but let me see. Yeah, no, you just need to put a semicolon to complete it. So let's try now running the migration plus the seeder. Now I want the tables to be created again. So I just say PHP artisan migrate, and then I seed. So I'll say PHP artisan, because right now if I say migrate, it will tell me there's nothing to migrate, because I've not created any new migration. But I want to repeat the entire stuff. I can say migrate fresh and then say seed. Or I can say also PHP artisan migrate seed. Let me see what will happen. Nothing to migrate, seeding database. So it will seed this database. Let's see if it created anything onto our student table. So back to our students table. Let's reload it. You'll find nothing is created. So let me try by saying PHP artisan migrate, and then I say fresh, and then seed. Let me see. Yeah, sure. So it will run the entire migrations that we had plus my new. You see my new student migration. And then seeding databases doesn't work. I think there's a problem somewhere. Seeding database has a problem somewhere. Is there a change made on this stuff really? Student database.class. It should run this. It should run this. Should run this, and then this one should go as this insert. So it should at least tell us seeding database and then give us the database name. Let me confirm in a second. Let me confirm what I missed. Is there anything which changed? Let me go to database header. Database header. All right. I forgot something here. What I forgot is inside this database header, you need to call this. You need to call this class. So what you just say this dot you call this, so that you call this class. Yeah. So you just say this dot call, then inside it you put this class. That's how you call it, so that at least if I run database seed, it will automatically try to run the particular seeder. So as you can see here, we have seeding databases. So it will start here, tell you it's running, then it's done. So once we go to our tables, you'll find we have it here. Yeah, so you have this seeder created this data here. So you can see Alex, blah 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 blah, and this updated as is left as empty, I think, because we used insert. Let me try use create in one of them. Let's just change this to create, because if you use insert, it assumes that field. Let me now do migrate fresh, because now I've already seeded my data, so I want a fresh seed. So if I tap on that, notice that the first one which I changed to create created these timestamps. So if you want timestamps to be created, use create instead of insert. So that's it. Let's change all of these to create, so that at least you know the differences. And then I run the migration again. So now I've created my data here. So I want to display this data onto our APIs. So let's keep going. So I'll close the student table. I'll close the migration. I'm done with it. Come here now to students. So this is where now you learn about the eloquent models. You'll need to go to that documentation and check them out. Under this documentation, you just go to eloquent. You can even search here. You search eloquent. You'll go to where there is eloquent. You just search here eloquent. You will see the different ORM methods that are available there. You'll see how we are calling, like to get all users, you do this, to get whatever, blah blah blah. So for me right now, I'll just do a sample. Let's get all the users. So it's just say my data variable should be, so type in your go with me, or maybe watch, whatever you're doing, so that later on you'll do it, because I want us to close this class. We are taking over an hour now. So you just say data is equals to, now our model was called what? Student. So you just say student dot all. You just call all the students. So if I return data in here, if I say return this data of mine, sorry, this data, if I say return data, and then I run now this test API. So this is the first one for get student. If I run this, you'll find that it will return all my students. You can now simply convert these to, you can convert it to JSON and say this one response should be always in JSON. So you just say response dot JSON, and then inside it you put this data. But now remember the format that we had previously. The format that we had previously was, we were creating, instead of just doing this like the way it is, I think it will still run, but it will give us some unformatted data here. So what we need to do is, we said we are doing something like, we are adding some parameter. We are saying like status is equals to success, or maybe status code. We say just put the status code to be 200, status code to be 200, and then you say data should be this data. Now the ones that you're having here, say that data is this data. So after this, once you're having this, if I do that, now you'll find my data will change based on how I formatted it. So you'll see it will give me the status of 200 in here. You'll find the status of 200, and then my data inside the data. So if you minimize this is the proper way of doing the API. If there is other metadata, you can just add it below there. So that we have done one API for. This is one API for get. This is for get users. This one goes to the index class. So I'll comment it. So this one goes to the index class. Let's create the second one. The second one, for adding a new user, it will be post. So this one will be post, this one will be post, and then you'll post to the same directory. So if I try right now to post, you see nothing will happen because it's going to this one, the second one. Forget about this create and blah blah blah. It's going to this. So in here, what I want to do, I want to create a new student. So I'll just say student dot create, not created but create. And then in here, what I want to do now, I want to pass this request, because anything I'll pass as request here, let me show you something. Anything I'll pass as request here, it will come here, but it is not an array. So I'll just say request.all to convert this one to array. So that one should be able to add a new student to my database. Let me test it with you. I'll say maybe dump this request, right? So you just say dd request. So that one will dump that request for you. So let's test it. So if I tap on request, it will dump this, but you can't see anything really here. On Postman, you could have seen it very well, but you can say also, you can say maybe request.all, something like that. We see if we'll find anything inside our request. So if you do that, you'll find there's nothing in it again, but the way it's displaying it, if you do this one in Postman, if you just do a post to this folder and then specify the content type and the type of the content type and headers, you set the head as well, like the accept and whatever, you'll see this, it will display our array. But this one is not supported for the JSON format that you're having, or this REST client that you're using. So right now, what I'll just do, for example, I'll just say echo that dot name. Let's see if name has anything on our request. So we just tap on this and say run this request. So if I do this, this var dump still no, let me echo. Let me just echo, and then I die. Just echo, and then I tell it to die. Okay. So that's just for PHP stuff, simple PHP, the basics. So if I do that, you'll see that there's nothing in here. But if I echo and say, maybe if now I add something onto this name, let me add a request here. I say maybe inside my data, I want name to be Samson, for example. So if I do that and I send it, you'll find that this one should display my name as Samson, but I've not specified some of there are some of the headers that I need to set, like the accepted the content type and accept. I need to say this one is JSON, application/JSON, and then I say accept. Also, I say accept application.json. This one also you can do it with Postman. So if this one you can set even the bearer token and whatever you have it. Let me test the second one and see. So this one doesn't give me anything like this one. So let me try this. Let me try to return the request. Let's see that how it behaves. So the request is empty. Yeah, you can see the request is empty. The reason for that being empty, I don't really understand. Probably is because I've used this. Let me try use the correct way. So this is a REST client issue. It's not API issue. So I'll try to run it again. Not really. Let me confirm in a second. So what you can do, you can just go to here and I'll even onto your REST client and check out how they are doing the headers, for example, and the data. Yeah, so they are doing content type the same way we have done, and then data is a name, sample, comma, blah blah blah. So it should work. This one needs to work. And then say, for example, you're adding address. Maybe this student is coming from Nairobi. So let's try this. Let me return this dot all. Let me call request dot all and see where I'm making this mistake. This one must work. Let's see. No, still not working. But rather, that's the return thing. Huh? That's the return thing. Let me just try it on Postman so that you just see. Uh-huh. This is where now the real coding comes in. When you're getting errors, when you're going smooth, it basically means you're not doing anything so far. But when now things start failing to run, that's where now the real coding starts, and that's where the learning starts. Yeah, so here we have the Postman. Let me just put it in a way that you can see it. Where's this Postman of mine? What is it doing? What is it doing actually? So this is my Postman. Let me see. It's loading like an old thing. Loading to load. So this is my Postman. Let me see if it will display full screen. It's taking some good time to load. Let me just see. Just wait for it. Yep. So let me create a new request here. Just test it out. So you can use Postman or the REST client. And so this one you just say this is post. Let's try that first and see. So you'll find there's an empty return. Yeah, so it's just returning an empty stuff. So let me put some data here and say name is equals to test, and then I send. It should at least, yeah, I should return something like this, of course without this. So I don't know why REST client is behaving or misbehaving, because we are supposed to get the same data when you say this, or probably we'll figure it out as we go, or maybe the content type. But this one should not give us those bugs. So that's just the first one. Let's now create the student and complete this tutorial. We'll check that later. Probably REST clients needs to do one or two things, but we'll know that. So let's say we are having this student. Now we are creating a new student. So I'll just come here and say this request.all will give me all the students. So whenever I'm passing here, I just create a student, and then I want to return all the students now. So after I create a student, I want to return the exact data, but with all the students. So find all the students and then return it to me. So I can just put the same code here. I say now after you create a student, return all the students, or even you can return the exact student who have been created. So let's test this. So if you just tap on this test student, you'll find it has returned all the students. Let's see if test was created. Yes, test is here, so it was created, ID number 5. If we tap again and say test 6, so you'll find that it will create another student with test 6. So you have created two APIs, one for get, one for insert. So the same you can do. I'll leave others. So if you have an address here and say Nairobi, Kenya, so it will just create, they say this is test number 7, it will just create the 7th one. So I've created for you the two APIs. I want you to complete the rest and let me know if there's anything that you find challenging. So this is how you create it. But for students, I'll do it and then I'll give you the rest for, you can create a test one and test. So if you're having, so forget about show. These others are just used when you're doing you want to create a form in the front end. We'll do that in the front end where you're creating a form, and then you want this form. Whenever you click new, it goes to the next form. But for our case, in the view that we are using, we'll just be using a single page application. That's the SPA, a single page. So we will not need all these redirects to edit, redirects to show, redirects to blah blah blah. So do away with that. We will not need it in this tutorial. So let me have this one. Now let me do the two, and then you'll create your new controller and try it out yourself. So for example, if it's edit, I'll just come here and say, first I need to find the data or the resource. I usually like to call it resource is equals to student. Just watch and then you'll do it later. Student dot find or fail. If it doesn't find, it will fail. You can use even find alone, and then this is the ID. So mark that when you are doing these, when you are doing when you are doing these artisan root v, you'll see the way the roots are being created. A root, is it sure? Did I really remember that? Root list. Root list. So whenever you do root list, you'll find that what is happening. Probably there's an error in my somewhere. There's an error here. That's why it's failing to work. Notice that the root list won't work if there's an error in your controller. So you'll find that this one is like this one. The put is what the one I'm getting. So we have done this student list. This student we have done. This post we have done. This one we have removed even this root, so it should be out. And then we have done a get is for getting one student. If you want to get that one student, you will find and get. And then we have put. Now this is what we are doing. So under put, you'll find there's this student parameter being passed. So that's what comes in here as ID. So we have the request and the ID. So you just find that one model, and then you say resource dot update. You want to update this resource, and then you update it with whatever we are having in our request. Then this one is what you'll be doing. So after you update again, you'll return whatever the thing you want to return. Yep. So I don't want this tutorial to be too long, so that's why I'll cut it at that. So this one you just do update. You'll complete this one by your own. You just do this one slash update request.all, and then you return whatever the thing that you want to return in here onto your backend. Why is it complaining? Unexpected token this. Yep. So you'll say that one dot kind of that one dot update. Let me see. You just have to say this, and then you say request dot all. I think that's what it wants us to do. Yes, perfect. So that's how it should be. Where is it? Oh, there's something I'm leaving here. Yeah, that's how it should be for update, and then you return. So clear that out, do for the destroy, and do for the rest of this one as you're testing all those APIs. But basically, that's how we are creating API. That's how we're installing a Laravel app. At least now you have an idea on how we do the APIs. So on to the next assignment. Do the rest of the remaining packages, and then try out new routes. Like if you want new routes, let's say for teachers, let's say for other things, and then I'll record the next tutorial for doing now the relationships, doing other stuff, the deeper way. This was just to show you how to set up the Laravel and have it up and running the right way. So from there, you are now able to create a RESTful API. For delete, you just go to the delete one, do the delete. You just say find or fail, just find this and delete it, as simple as this. So it's just right now it's just like you just say resource dot delete. So right now is just going at gear 4. You say destroy. You just say destroy. This one will destroy that item for you. So do that and test it in Postman. That's how it creates, and that's how I was expecting you to be generating the APIs and to be doing the RESTful APIs. So practice with that. Assignment is coming up, and we shall meet on the next tutorial. And that's it. Bye bye. Cheers.